Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. It is time to have a look at some winter event leaks once again. Chabby has provided us with some information at what we're going to see from the winter event, and we've already had a look at a few of those vehicles, but we'll do a little bit of a refresher in this video. Basically, the leaks are the EFVP-1 for America, the Kirishima for the Japanese, then a fighter for France, and also a fighter for Israel, so it looks like we're going heavy on the aviation side of things. Remember, when it comes to the winter event, they're keeping it the same as previous winter events. Instead of doing the single vehicle event that they've been doing this whole year, they are going to be doing a full event, so 4 vehicles it looks like are going to be on offer, which is really cool. So in this video, we're going to talk about all of the different vehicles and also talk about how the event's going to be structured. So, if you enjoy the content, make sure to subscribe, and let's get started. Just before we get started, I do want to mention a game that's going into closed beta. This isn't sponsored or anything, I just think it's a really cool game. The game is called Grit and Valor, and basically it's kind of like Wolfenstein in a way. So you know how Wolfenstein, like the Germans won the war, and then you're fighting kind of a resistance movement against them. So in Grit and Valor, you're doing that, but in mechs, and also in a more strategic way, and trying to fight the different kind of campaigns to push back the Germans in 1949, which I think is actually really cool. So I'll leave a link to the closed beta in the description and also in the pinned comment, just if you want to try it out. I think it's available to everybody. The beta is going to be running from the 4th to the 16th, and you might as well give it a go, right? It's basically just like an extended demo. Anyway, let's get into the content. The first vehicle is the EFVP-1. Now, we did have a look at this before, but I just wanted to mention that there is a Congressional Research Service PDF which goes through pretty much everything about the project that is kind of publicly known, and it's worth having a look at that if you are really interested in the project itself. It's only 14 pages, it's a nice little read, just kind of goes through not just the vehicle itself, but also the issues that it ran into along the way, and also the different variants of the EFE. The P1 specifically is the one which is more of kind of like the IFE one, the amphibious vehicle that's supposed to carry the Marines onto the shore and then also provide firepower for them, very similar to some other vehicles that we saw during the Second World War. This is pretty much a more modern version of that, and generally I think it's actually really cool. The vehicles themselves would be armed with standard autocannons, and the major thing is the fact that they're incredibly fast on land and also amphibiously, so these things would be super mobile going around the place. But if you are interested more, make sure to read that PDF. It is a fantastic look at it. For the naval element, we have the Kirishima, and the Kirishima itself is another Congo-class ship. This will be the second event one that we have in the game, since we already have the Haruna. The difference between them is the Kirishima should be kind of an earlier version of it, so therefore have the main armament, but maybe not have as many secondaries. They also might decide that it's going to have the different kind of construction of it, since these were rebuilt between the First and Second World War. So that could be kind of interesting, unless it's exactly the same one, which would be kind of boring. The vehicle itself being a Congo class, it has the 356mm or the 14-inch guns. It also has a lot of secondaries, but not a lot of AA guns, basically because of the fact that this vehicle was actually sunk in 1942 at the Battle of Guadalcanal, so it didn't get the AA refit, which added a million 25mm to it, just like a lot of other large ships that Japan had. So the vehicle itself would be really cool to see, but also not too different than what we already have. Now, since we don't know exactly what the Israeli fighter and the French fighter is, I would really like your opinions on it. For me, I'm going for 2 pretty fun vehicles that I hope get added in. The first one is for France, and it is the Mirage 2000 EG. Now, the Mirage 2000 EG is a Greek Mirage. Basically, it's based off the Mirage 2000-5, and it is an export model to the Greeks. The big difference between the good old 2000-5 Mark II and the 2000 EG is the avionics upgrade that the EG gets. Basically, the EG is much more modern than it and gives it a lot more when it comes to the cockpit and also general stuff that the pilot can use. It also gets access to some pretty crazy weaponry. The Mirage 2000 EGs were first designed for air-to-air combat to be able to be kind of like an interceptor role, so they were given stuff like the Mekas, which are of course very powerful. It can carry two different types of the Meka, the IR missile and also the RF, which is the radar guided missile, which is used in BVR combat, and they can carry a mix of the IR and the RF, making it obviously very powerful at the end of the day. The other part as well is they use Magic 2s, the R550, so if they want to mix the Mekas and also the Magics, they can do that. The cool thing about the EG series, though, is it also has other capabilities. So these vehicles can also use anti-ship and also anti-ground ordnance. Whether it's dumb bombs, whether it's rockets, they are able to do that. And also, it can carry the Exocet, which I don't think we actually have in the game yet. And that would be really cool. Since it's also a very modern Mirage 2000, it also has access to a countermeasure suite, which would be really nice instead of not being able to defend yourself, and at the same time, pretty much any other armament that you would want. It would also be a Greek one, so it would give you a little bit more of a kind of feel for Greece in the game, since Greece seems to be one of those nations where they do add like one or two vehicles for them, such as the Greek Apache, but also there's a ton of camouflages for Greece, and that's really about it. Why not have some specific Hellenic vehicles, especially since if you've had a look at the Greek army, it's very much stacked with a lot of imported equipment from other places. So it's perfect to kind of like plonk these vehicles all over different nations for Greece. For Israel, we're going to have a look at the LaV. Now, the LaV is a very interesting aircraft because it has the story of many others. The TSR-2, for example, and also stuff like the Avro Arrow. If it wasn't for those damn Americans, we would have made the best vehicle that ever existed, which is unfortunately the story of a lot of these nations, which unfortunately is also quite unbelievable, because it means that, well, the way that you would have to believe in that thinking is to also believe that the world exists in a vacuum and nothing else would change alongside of it. But basically, the LaV was supposed to be a fourth generation multi-role jet fighter. It was one that was seen as very powerful in the 1980s. They built 3 prototypes of it, and unfortunately, it kind of got done in by political stuff. And when you have a look at it, it makes a lot of sense, unfortunately. If you have a look at a lot of countries nowadays, they hardly even spend 5% of their GDP on the military-industrial complex of that country. In the 1980s, Israel was spending nearly 20% of its overall budget on the military, which is insane when you actually think about it. A fifth of their GDP was being spent on military. So they decided it was probably best to start scaling that back, because obviously that was massively unsustainable. And the LaV project was unfortunately one of those that was put up to the axe to be able to get rid of, and unfortunately it lost. So the LaV never really got to its full potential. It only got a few prototypes built, but of course there was a lot of people who were involved in the project who believed that it would have created the new dawning of a new age of aircraft, and how Israel would have had the best ever fighter that ever existed, which at least is an interesting claim, and one that can always be touted because of the fact that it was never fully realized. This vehicle used a Pratt & Whitney engine, the PW1120. It was able to go nearly Mach 2 and only had access to a 30mm. There was obviously provisions to add missiles to it, but since it was only really test flown and there was only a few prototypes, it never really went anywhere. The more controversial thing about this is when it came to the cancellation of the larvae, the actual vote for it was a 12 to 11 vote, so incredibly close. And also, as usual when it comes to these things, there was supposedly a bunch of American government mingling with these things, which isn't too surprising since everybody has their own interest when it comes to these. It would also have access to pretty much all of the systems you would find from a 1980s vehicle, including a bunch of active and passive countermeasures. It also had a pretty cool radar, the ELM-2032 Doppler multimode radar. This would mean that it could use air-to-air, air-to-ground modes, and also high-resolution mapping. So it would be really useful in terms of not just air, but also ground ordnance, which it never had. So hopefully, at some point in game, it can be fully realized in what it would have eventually came. And maybe it will become the best fighter ever built and take over its BR bracket. Or it might not, who knows. Whatever happens, the great thing about War Thunder is it is a platform where stuff like this can exist, where it can kind of show what the vehicle could have done in real life, at least in a game setting. And that's why War Thunder is pretty fun. You can actually have these ideas, and hopefully we'll see the larvae and many others pretty soon. As I've said, make sure to let me know what you would like to see and what you think will come this winter event. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank GMG Smiley, CD Beans, Chieftain Mike, EMN3 Galaxy, Tulio Pontecorvo, Brendan Quinn, Carrion Crow, Gus Irenicus, Pyman, Wartinder, Teddy, Daniel Stanton, Martinez, B. Young, Ozzy Panzer, Alan Hacker, Liam Shear, Opium Prime, Lafouche, Sem, Aslan, Uncle Bean, and Derek R. for supporting the channel.